Hi, the objective in today's video would be to share 10 scenarios of how positivity can help you improve your chances to pass interviews and sometimes even save the day. Right? The first scenario I'd like to take into account here would be ending your answers on a positive note. Okay, so if you look at your story bank, chances are there are some answers that you wish could sound more positive. Right, so to give an extreme scenario here, if I'd ask you, tell me about a time when you failed, your objective wouldn't be to share your failure and end with that, I failed delivering a report to my boss 2 weeks ago, and that's it. You would want to maybe read a bit between the lines and maybe share a few learnings, how you grew from that experience, something more positive, something to sell yourself on during these job interviews. And the same goes with pretty much any interview question, even if you answer it, even if it's not a failure story that you're sharing a challenging situation. One way you would want to make that answer more positive would be to introduce learnings for your answers, right? So try to be more positive in the way you answer interview questions, right? The second scenario you could benefit from a little bit more positivity will be when building rapport with your interviewer. So early on during the conversation, you may not enjoy too much the small talk, but some people prefer to smile right in the beginning when they meet their interviewer, on the reasoning that the first impression is also the last impression, right? It won't make you land the job, but still it will help you to project a little bit of positivity during your exchange. What I would recommend here is you would try this out either in a mirror, either with a coach, to see how this goes, The third scenario of how you can add a bit more positivity in your interview answers would be with your elevator pitch. Okay, so what happens here, what you could do is to study a little bit who you're interviewing with and try to find some common interests with them. I don't know, maybe you both like fishing, or maybe you both play poker, I don't know. But bringing this up in your elevator pitch is gonna make you a little bit more likable. Okay, how to make yourself a bit likable by sharing some common interests you have with them. Okay, point number 4. This refers to the moment before your interview, or my point here is that the way you prepare your job interview, or the way you stress out right before your job interview, is likely to show during your job interview as well. Okay, so candidates are far easier to read than most of you think. So instead of stressing out right before your interview, try introducing a bit of positive thinking. I don't know, think about how you're going to reward yourself if you pass your job interviews. Okay, so bringing in a little bit of positivity in your mind right before the interview happens will show during the interview as well, right? Point number 5 I wanted to share with you is refers to your interactions with the recruiter, with the hiring manager outside of your interviews. And what happens here is that most candidates prefer to have a super transactional approach where they could optimize their chances to get as much intel or as much insight with respect to their job interviews. In my opinion, this is highly inefficient, and this whole thing of getting insight of how the interview process works never yields any major results. But the point here, speaking of positivity, you can maybe transition from that mindset of a transactional exchange of give me as much info as possible to spending a little bit more time crafting those emails and showing a bit more thankful for the opportunity that you're provided with, because chances are if you're applying for a FANG job, you're interviewing for 0.001 best paid jobs in the world, right? Like, this is a super unique opportunity, and by exhibiting this gratefulness, so to speak, chances are you're going to also show a bit more likable also during your future interviews, and more likable overall, more positive overall when it comes to them making a decision about you. Okay, so it's not about asking people to help you, but people will help you if they feel like you are worth helping, so to speak. Right? Point number 6. During your interview, chances are there will be some moments where you feel like your interview doesn't go well. Well, I mean, to the extent you can read your interviewer and to the extent you keep some eye contact with them. But my point is, if you feel like you're losing them during the job interview, don't be shy. Try to interject them. Be helpful to them. Hey, am I going to the right direction? Is this what you want to hear? Maybe I have another story for you. But if you feel like you're losing them during the interview, quickly jump in and try to see what's going on. Why? What else can you bring to the table that could make them happy with your interview answers, right? Because what happens here, the extreme case is that people who just deliver their answers like this, never make any eye contact, never understand how the conversation evolves, never understand their expectations. But some people do want to understand their expectations, but are a bit shy. You know, so if they think, yeah, okay, well, he's not happy, okay, but that's life. No, you could interject with them, and, you know, some people will take it as a quite positive step, right? So you're also going to be a bit more likable during this interview because you helped them, right? Point number 7. Point number 7 refers to the statistical evidence that candidates tend to be more engaged in the first half of the interviews and less engaged during the second half of your interviews. You know, it's somewhat normal to have such a dynamic, because maybe you start with some high hopes for this job interview, and during the first half you give everything you have, and then the second half you're somewhat depleted of energy. Okay, and my point here is that you would want to fix that second half of your interview. And how would you do that? Well, you know, by first acknowledging that you may have this problem, and you can think of your previous interviews on whether your performance decreased during the second half of the interview, and if it did, then, you know, maybe keep a note, you know, hey, try to perform also during the second part of the interview, but more interestingly, maybe ensure that your performance will be uniform by not over-investing in the first half of your interview process, right? So, long story short, keep it positive also during the second part of your interview, right? Point number 8. Point number 8 refers to the last moments of the interview when they ask you, do you have any questions for me? Okay, so when you have to ask them some questions during the questions for them moment during the interview, and if you feel like your interview was a bit negative, you know, or you weren't exhibiting a lot of positivity during the job interview, you could also tune up your questions for them. You know, instead of asking them, what do you like the least of your job? What do you like the best in your role? Right? To try to show a bit more likable during the job interview. I agree, you know, it's not always the case. You don't want to be the most likable candidate during your job interviews. I don't believe this strategy is right. But the point is that I believe that positivity, and if I look at statistically speaking, positivity is an attribute of the most people I've helped land these jobs. Right? So questions for them, frame them more positively. If you feel like you'd get value from this, given how the conversation evolves. Point number 9. Point number 9 refers to an event that is also more common than people realize in job interviews, that of you getting stuck. Okay, and what happens here is most candidates, the moment they get stuck, it's game over. Negativity kicks in, you feel like, hey, everything is lost, you have no chance, and then you basically remain stuck for the remainder of the job interview. In my experience, this is not always the case. Okay, I've even had people who got stuck, who thought they failed their interview, and who got up-leveled as a result of it. It was a level 7, by the way, at Amazon. Now, what you should take from this? Well, you should understand that it's all about making peace with yourself as quickly as possible when you get stuck, because chances are, you don't always give the best or the most optimal answers. You cannot know everything. There's no such thing as the perfect job, as there's no such thing as the perfect candidate. Right? So get back on track quickly, acknowledge your shortcomings, you cannot be perfect, and move on. Okay, this is what I mean by getting back from that negativity, from that negative moment, by exhibiting a little bit of positivity, right? And finally, number 10, if your overall interview wasn't, maybe on the best notes, or maybe you feel like you could benefit from a little bit more positivity, one way you could improve this would be through thank you notes. Okay, so you could consider sending your interviewers thank you notes. Now, it varies, to what extent you feel comfortable doing this, but some people do feel comfortable, and some people found great value in sending thank you notes, which is another opportunity for you to exhibit a little bit more positivity. Right. So, long story short, I won't advise anyone to be as positive as possible during your job interview in a bit to get hired, but I believe these are the small details that do actually make a difference, in my experience, for the best candidates I work with. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.